heterotrophs. So heterotrophs. So the organisms here depends on other organisms. So all the non-photosynthetic organisms will come under heterotrophs. So if you see here, we have a plant, corn is shown here, right? That performs photosynthesis and produces food. That is eaten by a herbivore. This herbivore will be eaten by a carnivore. Here is a lizard consuming the grasshopper. Then we have a snake consuming the lizard. So these are all the heterotrophs. Grasshopper, lizard, snake, these are all heterotrophs since they depend on other organisms for their food. So let us see what happens in unicellular organisms. Let us consider amoeba. So how does it get its food? So in case of unicellular organisms like amoeba, you can see here that the false food or the pseudopodia is engulfing the food. So the food engulfed here in this picture is that this is the paramecium. So this paramecium is consumed by amoeba. So the false food is trapping the food here. False food is called as pseudopodia, and the process is called as phagocytosis. Process is called phagocytosis. Through phagocytosis, amoeba gets its food. Next, we have a simple multicellular organism, that is fungus. So this is the typical structure of fungus. It has hyphae, okay, thread-like or hair-like structure called as hyphae is there. If it has septum, then it is called as septate hyphae. So what happens in case of fungus is that the mode of nutrition in case of fungus is saprophytic. When I say saprophytic, these organisms depend on organic matter, that is dead and decaying organic matter. So the plants and animals which die and undergo decomposition forming organic matter, that will be fed by this fungus. Fungus will feed on those organic matter. That's why they are called saprophytic. Here we have another type of fungi called as lichen. These lichens always live in association with algae. Now, why do they live in association with algae? That is because there is a symbiotic relationship between them. Now, what is this symbiotic relationship? What happens between them? That is, lichen absorbs the moisture from the surrounding, as well as lichen will provide shelter for the algae. And the algae performs photosynthesis and prepares food for the lichen. So there is a mutualism between them. When I say mutualism, both get benefited here. Lichen gets the food and the algae gets the shelter and the moisture from the lichen. So there is a symbiotic relationship between them. So the mode of nutrition in case of lichen is called as symbiotic or symbiosis it is called. If you see the picture here, these are all insectivorous plant. So these plants depend on insects to get nutrients. The first plant here is a pitcher plant. You can see an insect getting trapped into the pitcher, right? Pitcher is a flask-like structure. It is a leaf modification in this particular plant. That modified leaf secretes enzymes which can digest the insect. So this is pitcher plant. Here I have Drosera, or it is also called as sundew plant. In case of Drosera or sundew plant, what happens is that the insect is getting trapped by the plant. You can see how it is getting trapped. After getting trapped, they will be digested by enzymes and the nutrients will be absorbed by the plants. Here I have Venus flytrap where the frog is getting trapped. Very soon, this frog is going to get digested by the enzymes produced by the Venus flytrap plant. So why are these plants trapping the insects? That is because they perform photosynthesis, but the nutrients like nitrogen is not present in the soil where they live. So the nutrients which are deficient in the soil where they live, that they obtain it from trapping the insects. So that is why they are called insectivorous plant. Now coming to parasitic nutrition. What is parasitic nutrition? When I say parasite, these are disease causing organisms. These organisms live in or on the host organism. They absorb the nutrients from the host organism. Parasitic nutrition can be of two types. That is, parasites can be of two types. One is endoparasite. When I say endoparasite, these parasites, they live inside the body of the host organism. For example, roundworm, tapeworm and plasmodium. Plasmodium causes malaria. So these organisms, that is roundworm, tapeworm, plasmodium, these are all called endoparasites since they live inside the host organism. Here in the blood, plasmodium lives, and we have roundworm and tapeworm living in the intestine of the host organism. Next we have ectoparasite. When we say ectoparasite, these parasites live on the body of the host organism. It may be skin or hair. So examples are lice, leech, sloth bear and cuscuta. These are the examples for ectoparasites. So they have parasitic mode of nutrition. They get nutrition from the host organism. So what you have to note here is that usually parasite is benefited, whereas the host organism is harmed. They get disease because of the parasite. Next comes Holozoic nutrition. When we say Holozoic nutrition, here organisms, they take the whole food and then digest the complex particle into small particle with the help of enzymes. Example for Holozoic mode of nutrition: amoeba, paramecium, animals and human beings. So these are examples for Holozoic mode of nutrition. So here, what are the different steps involved in Holozoic mode of nutrition? In Holozoic mode of nutrition, there is the first step would be ingestion. When I say ingestion, it is nothing but taking in the food. The food is consumed or food is taken inside the organism. That is called ingestion. After ingestion, we have the digestion process. During the digestion process, complex food particles are broken down into simple particles with the help of enzymes. When I say simple particle, these are absorbable. Okay, the organism is now able to absorb the nutrients from this food. Next comes assimilation. Assimilation is utilization of the digested food from the body. The digested food will be utilized by the body. That is called as assimilation. Next, the fourth step is egestion. Egestion is nothing but a removal of the waste substances or undigested food is removed from the body. That is called as egestion. So these are the steps involved in the process of digestion. Let's understand the process of digestion in detail now. So first is the chewing of the food, so that the larger particles will be broken down into smaller. So what we'll do, we'll chew the food. While chewing, teeth and tongue plays a very important role. Both teeth and tongue is involved in chewing process. After chewing process, we have swallowing. Swallowing is also called mastication. So in swallowing, what will happen? The food from the buccal cavity or the mouth cavity gets down into the esophagus. So here you can see that when the food comes or food drops into the esophagus, the windpipe is closed, right, by the epiglottis. The epiglottis immediately closes the food pipe. You can see epiglottis closing the food windpipe so that the food will not enter into the windpipe. So now the food has entered from the buccal cavity to the esophagus. So what next? Next will be the movement of the food in the esophagus towards the stomach. So this movement of the food throughout the alimentary canal, that is by a process called peristalsis. This movement is called peristalsis. Once the food reaches the stomach from the esophagus, you can see here, it reaches the stomach immediately closes here, right? That is with the help of a muscle called as lower esophagus sphincter. there is a sphincter muscle which closes. The food drops into the stomach and immediately the stomach closes. That is because of the sphincter muscle. This movement or this process here, the closing of the mouth, that helps in preventing the acid from the stomach getting into the esophagus. So what is peristalsis? So here, if you see the picture, as I told you earlier, the movement of the food in the alimentary canal is because of the peristalsis. Now what happens during peristalsis is that the muscles contract and relax. So when they contract, area of contraction is formed. When they relax, this is the area of relaxation. So this contraction and relaxation of the smooth muscles, which are involuntary, so that leads to the movement of the food in the alimentary canal. That is how the food is pushed in the alimentary canal. Now, coming to once the food enters into the stomach, what happens in the stomach? Let's understand that. Once the food enters the stomach has gastric glands. Gastric glands, they secrete gastric juices. Now, what are these gastric juices? When I say gastric juices, it contains hydrochloric acid as well as pepsin. So, due to the presence of hydrochloric acid, that is, the hydrochloric acid released from the gastric glands, an acidic environment is maintained in the stomach. And due to acidic environment, the pepsin enzyme gets activated. So I can say that the pepsinogen, which is the inactive state, inactive pepsinogen gets activated with the help of acidic environment. So pepsinogen gets activated into pepsin. Next, the pepsin digestion. Pepsin, it digests the protein present in the food. There is also something called as mucus, right? A fluid slimy layer present in the inner layer of the stomach. So this mucus, it protects the inner layer of stomach, preventing digestion of the inner layer of the stomach. The digestion of the inner layer of the stomach with the acid is prevented because of the presence of mucus. So this is what happens in the stomach. So altogether what happens, the acid chyme is produced. So these are the important parts for digestion of food. So once the food bolus, okay, the chewed food is called as bolus. Once the bolus enters the stomach, what will happen? It reacts with the hydrochloric acid and pepsin, forming acid chyme. Now this acid chyme has to be treated with different enzymes. So from where these enzymes are coming? These enzymes come from the liver. Liver produces bile juice. The bile juice produced by the liver is stored in the gallbladder. So that bile juice will enter into the small intestine. That is in the starting point of the small intestine, which is called as duodenum. So in the to the duodenum region, the bile juice is released. Bile juice basically contains bile salts. Similarly, the pancreatic juice also enters into the duodenum region of the intestine. So now let us see what reactions happen here in the duodenum region. So before understanding the reactions happening in the duodenum, let's just see what happens, how is the structure of the small intestine. Small intestine basically has villi and microvilli, the inner layer of the small intestine. So this villi and microvilli, it increases the surface area of the small intestine, and this helps in better absorption of the nutrients. So you can see here, these are the villi and these will be the microvilli. So villi and microvilli, they increase the surface area for absorption of the nutrients. So now, what is emulsification? What do you mean by emulsification? So as I told you, food also contains fat which has to be digested. So in the duodenum region, when there are complex lipid or food or the fat in food, those are in large globules. Those are in the form of large globules. Now, lipase enzyme, which comes from the pancreas, that cannot break these large globules. So these large globules have to be converted into smaller globules. and that is done by the bile juice. Bile juice contains bile salts. So bile salt will act on the large globules of fat and convert them into emulsified fat droplets. All these happens in the duodenum of the intestine. So here, if you take bile salt, it has hydrophobic and hydrophilic regions. So that helps in breaking down the large globules of fat into small fat droplets. Now these small fat droplets that can be digested by the lipase enzyme, which is released by the pancreas. Now stages in carbohydrate digestion. So the complex molecule of starch in case of herbivores and glycogen in case of the carnivores. So herbivores, what will happen in case of autotrophs? In case of autotrophs, the food is stored in the form of starch, whereas in heterotrophs, the food will be stored in the form of glycogen. So this complex molecule will be first broken down by the salivary amylase when we chew the food in the mouth. So that will be converted into disaccharides. Disaccharides can be maltose, sucrose, or it can be lactose. These disaccharides are then acted by the enzymes maltase, sucrase and lactase. These enzymes are going to convert the disaccharides into simple sugars. So simple sugars, from maltase we get 2 glucose molecule, from sucrase we get 1 glucose and 1 fructose, and from lactase we get, when lactase acts on lactose, we get 1 glucose and 1 galactose. So this is how the carbohydrate digestion happens. Next we have stages in protein digestion. So protein, which is a complex molecule, that will be acted by pepsin and HCl, that is in the stomach. So large peptide, so protein will be converted into large peptide molecules. Now these large peptide molecules will be acted by an enzyme called trypsin, produced by pancreas. So trypsin will act on large peptide and those will be broken down into smaller peptide. Now these smaller peptides will be treated with peptidase during the digestion, and what will be formed? Amino acids. And we know that protein is made up of amino acids. So from complex form it has reached to simpler form. So simple absorbable form is the amino acid. So this is the step involved in the protein digestion. So now finally, after the digestion process, what happens in the large intestine? So the excess of water present in the undigested food, that will be absorbed in the large intestine, as well as the contraction movement that helps in the egestion of the undigested food. So the undigested food gets excreted from the rectum through the anus, it gets excreted from the. So this is the function of large intestine: reabsorption of water and the helping in excretion of the undigested food.